Hi, I'm Lori Weinstein, and today I'm going to show you how to make a fantastic brisket that has been a hit in our family for decades. So first, what do you need? Well, you're going to start out with the brisket itself. That's something you can get from your local butcher, from a supermarket, from a grocery delivery, and it's actually called brisket. And the size that you need is going to vary based on how many people you're actually feeding. So I typically actually do this for over 30 people, and in that case, I've needed everything from 6 to over 10 pounds of meat. You can make this for one. Obviously, you'll need a much smaller amount, so just think about who's going to be eating it and how much beef you think they actually would eat, and that will help guide you. Keep in mind, this freezes beautifully, so I personally tend to plan more meat than I actually will need, so that if people want seconds, it's there, and you can always also have it for another meal. What you're going to need is a large pan. I will give you my tip, which is definitely you want a pan that is much larger than the meat. You're ultimately going to be working with gravy, with very hot gravy, and you're going to want to make sure that you have enough room to contain it all. You're also going to want, obviously, the meat. And then what I like to do is cut up some potatoes and to use some baby carrots, which make it much easier. If you don't particularly want to cut potatoes, you could also just buy smaller new potatoes, and that would work as well. You're also going to need our family secret, can of tomato sauce, can of cranberry sauce. You should also have on hand an onion, ketchup, and lots of tinfoil. Now this is a trick that my friend taught me. When I first started making this brisket, I found that the potatoes and the carrots just weren't as soft as I liked them inside the brisket. But I really was cooking the brisket for a long time. So what she taught me is that if I put the carrots and the potatoes into a pot and cook them first, just enough that they started to get tender, then when I put them and cook them fully with the brisket later, they came out just perfect. So that's what I do now. The other thing is, if you find that you really love the idea of the potatoes and carrots and brisket, but you don't want to alter the flavor too much of the brisket itself, what you can do is have a whole separate batch of potatoes that you put specifically even in the gravy later, and just cook them that way. I've done that sometimes too when I need just a larger portion of this particular type of potato. Now, while you've got the potatoes and the carrots cooking, you can take the time to slice your onion. And what you're looking to do is to ultimately create rings. That's how I've always done it. So now you've got your potatoes and carrots cooking, and while that's going on, you've sliced your onion. And so what you're going to do is you're going to break it into rings and just sort of put it around the pan. So what I like to do is just kind of lay it around the pan. You want to get a nice coating all together. After you've got the potatoes and carrots just a little soft, take them off of the stove, drain them, and you put them into this pan. They're gonna go, basically the bottom is lined with the potatoes, the carrots, and the onions. Then you're putting water in. Typically I look at about an inch of water. The idea is not to fill up the pan, but really just to sort of get your gravy started, and it's gonna combine with all the ingredients. And you're gonna be surprised how much it's gonna rise when everything comes together and how much gravy you end up with. When you're finished then, you just put on your brisket. What I do is I typically rinse off the brisket and then put it on. Obviously, of course, also be sure to wash your hands thoroughly before and after touching the meat or frankly any of the items that you're cooking. Now that you've got your brisket combined with your potatoes, carrots, and onions and water, you're going to make what's gonna go on top of the brisket. So as we talked about, you're gonna need a can of cranberry sauce. So for those of you that love this at Thanksgiving and are looking for an excuse to be able to use it again, this is your moment. Just put it in a bowl, and you're also gonna take about an even amount of tomato sauce. Typically for this, we use a can of tomato sauce. Again, you can make your own or use it out of a jar, but the idea is just figure it's gonna be about a 1-to-1 ratio for tomato sauce to cranberry sauce. So you're gonna put that in as well. And then what we're gonna do here is just mix it up. Just keep mushing it. Sort of like the same concept of when you're making a cake and you have a lot of lumps and you just have to keep stirring it and mushing the lumps until it all combines. So now that you've got your combination of tomato sauce and cranberry sauce reasonably smooth, what you're gonna do is just pour it right over the meat. Try to coat it about as well as you can. Some of it is probably gonna fall off the edge. Don't worry about it, but you do wanna try where you can to just keep it on the meat and spread it around. So now you've topped your meat with the mixture of cranberry sauce and tomato sauce. You've really nicely coated the meat, maybe a little bit coming into the water with the vegetables, but that's okay. It's all gonna be delicious and it's all gonna come up and make one nice, delicious gravy. The final touch that I like to do is just a little bit of ketchup. So what you're gonna do is just put a little, dollop on the top. For fun, I usually like to sign my masterpiece and put my initials in. So now that you've got your delicious dish all ready for the oven, the next thing you're gonna do is put on some foil. You're gonna cover the whole thing with foil and put it into the oven. This is what the brisket looks after about 4 hours of cooking. I've done 2 hours at 325 and 2 hours at 275. Now I'm going to put some of the juices on. Try to make sure that it's totally covering the meat. And I'm gonna put it back into the oven at a low temperature for another couple of hours. By the way, you're gonna see a lot of white floating around the brisket. That's actually fat. And so sometimes what I'll do is take some of that out while it is still firm and throw it away. Some people are gonna tell you that they wanna keep all the fat, and ultimately, if you cook it again, it is gonna keep melting in there. So that's up to you. The brisket, as I've mentioned, cooks for hours. One of the secrets to success is to make sure that you cook it low and slow, because what you really want is a nice tender brisket. So what I did this time is I did 2 hours at 325, 2 hours at 275, and 3 hours so far at 225. I'm actually planning to cook it longer, but I'm gonna look and see how it's coming along so far. What I would suggest if you're new is start low, start in the 250 to 300 range, do that for a couple of hours. You're probably gonna wanna add another few hours in a 225 to 250 range, but make sure that it looks like it's cooking, but doesn't look like it's burning. So here's another tip for you. When you're making the meat, especially in a disposable pan, they can sometimes be a little bit wobbly. The meat's, pretty heavy and dense, and you don't wanna end up, especially when you have hot gravy, with an insecure pan. So what I will usually do is I'll take a metal cookie sheet, baking sheet, and put it underneath the meat so that I can actually carry that instead and put it in and out of the oven. After you've cooked your brisket for a few hours, it may be 3, it may be 7, what you're gonna wanna do is slice it. Don't worry, this is not the last chance for you to cook your brisket. You're gonna slice it and you're gonna end up putting it back in the oven and cooking for more hours. But this is a wonderful time to check in with your brisket. See, is it starting to feel tender? Does it look like it's cooking all the way through? Is it looking like it's burning? This is a chance for you to figure out what to do for the next couple hours of your brisket. How you slice your brisket is actually a really important element to the overall success of the brisket. And there's 3 main things you need to know. First, always cut against the grain. If you do this wrong, you're gonna find very tough brisket no matter how long you cook it for. So definitely cut against the grain. Second, our family tip is to cut it thin. I'm not talking deli thin where you can see through it. I'm just talking, don't make big thick slices. Make sure that you have nice, somewhat even, thinner slices. What you're gonna find is that they cook better, they soften, they just come out better. Third, if you can, get yourself an electric knife. Depending on the size of what you're cutting, it can take a while, it can be a little heavy on your hand, and so we found that an electric knife does the job a little quicker and easier. That said, last year my electric knife broke and I did it by hand and it worked out as well. So if you don't have one, don't panic. You can absolutely still use a regular knife. Again, just against the grain and keep it thin. For the slicing stage, you're gonna want a cutting board, an electric knife if you have it, or else just a good sharp knife. You're also going to want the pan that you're going to put the meat into when you're done. I actually find that this stage is not only a great chance to check in with how your meat is doing, but also to put it into the dish that I'm going to use in the end to serve it, and also the dish that I'm going to use to store it in the freezer before. So in our case, that's typically this pan. Because we're normally dealing with a lot of meat, it's oftentimes several pans. But you can pick any pan that you like that you're going to want to serve it in and that's going to survive well in your freezer.
Notice the thin, even slices. And after a few more hours at 225, your brisket should look like this.
So now you know how to make a crowd-pleasing brisket. Whether you have it for a holiday, a special occasion, or just another night that you want to enjoy something fabulous, I hope that you enjoy it in good health.